Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist from Athens, Greece on April 16th, 2026. Today we're very pleased to be joined again by Dr. Foad Izadi. Dr. Izadi is an associate professor at the Department of American Studies, Faculty of World Studies, University of Tehran, where he teaches MA and PhD courses in American Studies. His research and teaching interests are interdisciplinary and focus on U.S.-Iran relations and U.S. public diplomacy. Hard to think of somebody who's better qualified to address the subjects we want to talk about today, Dr. Izadi. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
So before we begin, I just want to remind our viewers to please like and share this video if you find it to be informative. And we're almost just a nudge away from 170,000 subscribers, and you can help us to get over that threshold today by subscribing if you are not already a subscriber. So with that, Dr. Izadi, of course, much of the world's attention is currently focused on the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. has declared a blockade apparently on ships passing through the strait and traveling to or from Iranian ports. To your knowledge, has this blockade been effective in preventing ships from traveling to and from Iranian ports?
We have the Iranian side saying that ships are going through, Iranian ships are going through. We had six ships, according to the Iranian side, that went through. They didn't face any difficulties coming in and going out, six altogether. And then we have the U.S. side that is saying that they are telling Iranian ships to go back to their ports. We had Al Jazeera a few hours ago confirming the Iranian version that the Iranian ships are actually going through. And we had the head of Iran's military saying that if this blockade wants to be actually implemented, then Iran would not only completely close the Strait of Hormuz, because blockading is an act of war. Iran, as a coastal state, has some rights under the Convention on Law of Seas. Ships that pass through these waterways need to make sure that it's innocent passage. This is the terminology they have. That's Article 17 of Convention on Law of Seas. And Article 19 defines what it means by innocent passage. It means that ships should not threaten the security of coastal states. When you kill over 3,200 civilians in Iran, attack infrastructure, do all these damages, you're not doing too well on maintaining security of coastal states. So Iran has rights under international law as a coastal state. United States is 11,000 kilometers away. The United States is not a coastal state in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran and Oman are coastal states. So they have no right to blockade. The announcement for blockade came less than 24 hours after the talks in Islamabad. Not a good sign that the U.S. is ready to actually end this war. And the head of Iranian military said that they will close the straits if this blockade continue. The Strait of Hormuz and Bab al-Mandab, which is in the Red Sea. And, Iran can do that on its own. The range of Iranian missiles reach Bab al-Mandab from Iran. So Iran, with 2,000 kilometer ballistic missiles, Iran has plenty of those. Iran can close Bab al-Mandab on its own. They don't need the help of Yemenis to do that.
Mhm.
So overall, the Trump administration is escalating. Not a good sign. And we had this Washington Post report yesterday saying that thousands of fresh American troops are coming to this region. So we have to wait and see whether the U.S. side is serious about these talks or they're just resting and getting ready for the next round of attacks on Iran.
Yeah, now I do want to come back to this troop buildup in a moment, but I just, for a moment, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how the Arab autocracies in the Persian Gulf view this blockade. Have you been able to glean from their public statements or private leaks of information whether they support it, whether they're opposed to it, whether they're neutral?
We had the U.S. Secretary of War. I think he should be called the U.S. Secretary of War Crimes, because that's what they are actually doing. He said that these Persian Gulf states are fighting shoulder to shoulder. I'm quoting him, shoulder to shoulder with the United States against Iran. Trump has said that many times in the last many days, thanking these states, sort of saying that they're doing much better in comparison to Europeans that have refused to join this illegal war on Iran. Attacking Iran was illegal under international law, and joining that attack against Iran is illegal under international law. And we have had numerous reports in Western news outlets saying that these countries are providing bases, providing their land and air for this attack. We had the Wall Street Journal reporting that the Saudis are providing bases for these refueling tankers with pictures, because we saw Iranian drones attacking these refueling airplanes, and Trump tried to dismiss that report, saying that the Wall Street Journal had said that there were 5 refueling tankers, and Trump said it was only 1, basically confirming that the Saudis are providing these bases. We had Kuwaiti airspace used by the United States. Kuwaitis had said that they would not allow that, but they shot American jets on I think it was second day of the war. How would you be able to shoot American jets by mistake? You would be able to do that if they're using your airspace. So these states, Persian Gulf states, are very much in line with what the U.S. is doing, and they're going to be responsible. And we have had reports, again, New York Times reporting that the Saudi prince is asking Trump to continue with this war and attack Iran more. The hope that the Iranian side has is that these monarchies realize that this is a failed policy. They realize that the damages that Iran has endured, they are also responsible for it, both financially and otherwise. And the hope is that they realize they should not follow Trump off the cliff. Whether they do that or not, we have to wait and see.
It seems so obvious that that's exactly where they will end up, off the cliff, if this escalates. I mean, their oil infrastructure, their desalination plants, their military infrastructure is completely vulnerable to Iranian ballistic missile and drone attacks. What do you think the motivation is on their part to support this? Is it that they simply don't have a choice because Washington demands it and they're entirely vulnerable to Washington? Is this religiously motivated? Is it delusional incompetence? Why do you think they would support this escalation when they are extremely existentially vulnerable to counterattacks from Iran?
I don't think it's religiously motivated. These people are not religious people. They belong to the Epstein class. You have seen all the pictures, them partying with Epstein. These are client states of the United States. A lot of times they don't have any choice. And since they know they don't have any choice, they just pretend to have choice, and they pretend to support the United States on their own will. The U.S. is good at changing princes when they want. The current prince in Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, was not supposed to be the crown prince. It was his cousin, Mohammed bin Naif, that was supposed to be the next king. And he was more of an independent player. When Iranians were facing difficulties with some U.S. policies, he would resolve some of these problems when he was the crown prince. And maybe this is one of the reasons that he was dismissed and we had Mohammed bin Salman instead.
Mm-hmm.
So these monarchies realize that they need to listen to the United States. They have an opportunity now to free themselves from this type of treatment. Trump talks about, you're a family show, so I don't know if we can repeat profanity, but
Yeah.
Trump was talking about Mohammed bin Salman kissing his ass.
Mhm.
I'm sorry for, I mean, I'm just quoting him.
That's right.
So if you are a Saudi government official and you have access to all this petrodollars, uh, just freeing yourself from this type of treatment, at least diversifying uh, your allies. Um, this is the choice, but the better choice. We are moving towards a multipolar world. The United States is a country in decline. How do we know that? They elect someone like Trump as president. This is a sign that United States is a country in decline. But
Mhm.
whether they would use this opportunity to free themselves from American hegemony, that's something that we have to wait and see. I'm not very optimistic.
Yeah. So I'd like to focus for a moment on the Chinese government's reaction to this blockade. Several government officials have issued statements about it in recent days, and taken together, I think these statements have created some confusion, and quite intentionally, perhaps, from the Chinese government about how it intends to deal with this blockade. So, for example, we had a statement by the Minister of Defense, which basically told the Americans, you better not try to interfere with our maritime trade with Iran. And then there seemed to be some backtracking from that by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. And more recently, in a response to a question about the blockade from, I believe it was a Russian journalist, a spokesperson from the foreign ministry said the following. His name was Guo Yakun. Quote, with a temporary ceasefire agreement still in place, the United States ramped up military deployment and resorted to a targeted blockade. This will only aggravate confrontation, escalate tension, undermine the already fragile ceasefire, and further jeopardize safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. It is a dangerous and irresponsible move. China believes that only a complete ceasefire can fundamentally create conditions for easing the situation. We urge relevant parties to honor the ceasefire agreement, stick to the direction of peace talks, and take concrete actions to de-escalate the situation so that normal traffic via the Strait will be able to resume as soon as possible, close quote. So clearly, the Chinese government condemns the blockade, but it's not clear what it's going to do if the United States does attempt to interfere with maritime trade between Iran and China. What do you expect the Chinese government will do? First of all, do you think that the Americans will even dare to do that? And secondly, if they attempt it, how do you think the Chinese government would respond?
This is normal. Um, in Iran, we have a similar situation. What people at the foreign ministry think and say is sometimes not exactly the same terminology that people in the Iranian military use. And you see that in China, in the Chinese foreign ministry, there are people who want to keep good relations with the United States. And generally, the militaries are more hawkish when it comes to the national interest of countries and making sure the other side is uh, not engaging in hostile activities. This is the job of the armies. So people in Iran understand these things because they see these things in their own country. Militarily, Iran does not need the help of China. Uh, Militarily, Iran can manage on its own. Uh, China has been a friendly country. They have been buying Iranian oil. They are going to be negatively affected if this blockade continues. And I think this is a decision for the Chinese government to make. Trump is going to China. He's supposed to go to China in May. And I think one reason he's going to China is to encourage Chinese to be on his side. But Chinese are smarter than that. They realize that Trump is not doing well politically We are not even sure if he's going to finish his term. And Iran is going to be around for many, many years after Trump has left the White House. So, given the fact that Iran will be controlling the Strait of Hormuz, then if you're China or Russia or other countries that use this strait for business and geopolitical reasons, you don't want to be siding with someone like Trump. Even Europeans are not doing that. The other day we had this French ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz. It was carrying fertilizers. Trump has been encouraging these European countries to choose him and follow him off the cliff. And when the French had a choice between fertilizers and Trump, they chose fertilizers. And I think Chinese realized that the one reason that the U.S. is doing what U.S. is doing is to have leverage against China. This is what Lindsey Graham said in the earlier days of war, that that they want to take over Iranian oil. Right now, when they cannot tell UAE or Kuwait or Saudi Arabia not to sell oil to China because that would increase the value of Iranian oil. But if they can take over Iranian oil, then that would create leverage against China, given the fact that China gets about 30-40% of its fossil fuel from the Persian Gulf. A leverage that the US doesn't have right now. Trump thought that he can push around China with tariffs. That's not going to work out, especially after the Supreme Court decision. Chinese have leverage on the United States with rare minerals. China produces 90% of that, so even the US military depends on China to be able to manufacture and function. So overall, I think China is in a good shape. They may decide to push harder against the United States, but we just have to wait and see.
That French vessel you mentioned carrying fertilizer, is it your understanding that it paid a toll for passage through the Strait of Hormuz?
The U.S. has said that if ships pay a toll, they're going to be upset. So I think they're going to keep that secret. It's in the interest of the ship owner to not to publicize that, because they don't want to be harassed by the United States, and Iran doesn't need to publicize it either. So this is if you have the Turkish government collecting passage fees, this is what they call it, on the straits that they have access to. Australia, Torres Straits, they collect, since they're a member of a party to the conventional law of seas, they don't call it a passage fee, they call it pilotage fee, but they force every ship that goes through the Torres Straits to pay that pilotage fee. Canada does the same thing. Denmark, the countries that are members of the conventional law of seas, they collect money from the straits they have access to, and they call it pilotage fee. And countries like Turkey that are not party to the conventional law of seas do it, and they call it passage fees. And Iran is going to collect fees. Normally, when a country attacks your country and they fail, as the US has failed, then they need to pay for all the damages that they have done. But Iranians realize that the US government will not pay Iran, so they have to get payment on their own. And how would they do that? By collecting these tolls. And since Iran is not party to conventional law of seas, and the Strait of Hormuz is in Iranian and Omani territorial waters, the territorial waters are defined to be 12 kilometers, and the Strait of Hormuz is just 12 miles and 21 miles. Mm-hmm. So you add 12 plus 12 is 24. 21 is less than 24. So
I'm not sure that Donald Trump grasped that, but
I was on Sky News, and not all the anchors and the people who do the interviews, they're not as smart as you are. So this anchor at Sky News uh, asked me why would Iran want to collect tolls, and I asked him, do you know that the territorial waters are defined to be 12 miles? He didn't know that. Then I asked him, do you know what's the width of Strait of Hormuz? He didn't know that. So I had to tell him these things. And then you have to joke. So he said that you do know that 12 plus 12 is 24. And then you do know that 21 is less than 24. So, since I do these interviews sometimes just for the fun of it, I have to do these things.
You're a patient man, Dr. Izadi, that's
Yeah.
for sure. So let's move on to Donald Trump's latest extravagant claim. He gave an interview with Fox News within the past 24 hours in which he said that he believed that this war would soon be over, and that he either stated outright or insinuated that the negotiations were about to resume. So, to your understanding, Dr. Izadi, are negotiations currently taking place? And if not, do you believe there to be an agreement, a firm agreement to resume those negotiations imminently?
We have the Pakistani army chief, Field Marshal in Tehran. He arrived last night, and he's bringing an American proposal, and then he's going to Washington after he leaves here. I guess he's taking the Iranian answer to Washington. Iran has always been available for an agreement on its nuclear program. Iran did that in 2015. It was working until Trump left it in 2018. So Iran can do something similar to that. But if the US is demanding to limit Iranian ballistic missiles, that's not going to happen because Iran needs these missiles to hit Tel Aviv and Haifa next time Israelis attack Iran. Iran needs to make sure that there is ceasefire in Lebanon. That's going to have a veto power on Iran's decision. If there is no ceasefire in Lebanon, Iran will not accept any agreement with the United States. Uh, Netanyahu should not be able to just kill Lebanese civilians. On the first day of ceasefire, they killed over 300 civilians. That should not be allowed. So there are these things that Iran needs to have, uh, and Iran is available for an agreement on its nuclear program. Iran has always been able to do that. In fact, you had this Jake Sullivan, the former national security advisor, saying that Kushner and Witkoff did not understand the Iranian offer when Oman was mediating. Uh, we hope that J.D. Vance is understanding what Iran is telling him. So Iran is available for that, but other things Iran would not be available.
Now, I want to return to this buildup, this troop buildup that you mentioned at the outset. There was a very, I thought, unusual statement issued by the Russian Security Council within the past 24 hours, I believe. It was a warning. And this is the body that is effectively the oversight organization or agency for national security in Russia. It's chaired by Russian President Vladimir Putin. The vice president is former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Sergei Shoigu, former defense minister, is the secretary. This is an extremely powerful body within Russia. And normally when it does comment, which isn't very often, it comments on matters relating directly to Russian national security. So, for example, the Ukraine war. But this was all about the U.S. Israeli war of aggression on Iran. And it stated in part as follows. There are about 500 units of U.S. Air Force aircraft on the airfields in the Middle East, including more than 250 tactical aircraft, as well as over 20 Navy ships. As stated by Trump, these forces will remain in their positions near Iran until Tehran fulfills the conditions set by Washington. And it goes on and says the deployment of units from the 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East continues. Amphibious assault group led by Universal Amphibious Assault Ship USS Boxer, with 2,500 Marines and an aircraft carrier strike group uh, led by nuclear-powered multi-purpose aircraft carrier USS George Bush, are moving into the conflict zone. The expected arrival time in the Arabian Sea is just in time for the expiration of the 2-week truce. And all of this, Dr. Izadi, is framed explicitly as a warning that the United States may be about to use the negotiations as a cover for a ground operation against the Islamic Republic. What do you make of this warning, Dr. Izadi? Both the fact that, I mean, the warning itself, I'm interested in your thoughts about that. Do you think the Russians are quite correct to be suggesting publicly that this may all be a ruse, these so-called negotiations, for yet another act of treachery by the Americans and the Israelis? And secondarily, why do you think Russia would come out and say this publicly? Obviously, they could share this view with the Iranian military leadership as if they, I'm sure that the Iranian military leadership could figure this out for itself. But this is interesting that they're making this statement publicly. What do you make of all this?
I think Russia realizes that if the U.S. is able to achieve its goals against Iran, that's not going to be good for Russia. We have this north-south corridor that passes actually through the Strait of Hormuz, and that is the Russian access to global south. Of course, Turkey is there as well, uh, but Turkey is a NATO member, and if the U.S. is able to disintegrate Iran, overthrow the Iranian government, take over Iranian oil, then they could put pressure on Turkey to, as a NATO member, to basically follow orders from Washington. And so with Turkey on the U.S. side, Iran disintegrated. The other option is Afghanistan, which doesn't have access to a sea, and then you have China, which is that's not global south, that's global east. So Russia realizes that the United States should not get away with this type of criminal behaviors against other countries. I go on Russian television a lot, and they're actually more pro-Iran than sometimes. Their statements are stronger than what I'm telling them. Uh, this is a terminology that I hear a lot, that they say that they're defending the western borders of Eurasia, and Iran is defending the southern borders of Eurasia. So they feel that there is this common interest and common problem. And I think the reason they have issued that statement, I think it's a way of telling the United States that they're watching the situation carefully. They are maybe sending a message to some people in Iran that think that this is actually a more serious negotiation than they should be thinking about. So they're advising the Iranian government through statements, basically. And as I said, in Iran we have some people who are optimistic about these negotiations. We have some people who are pessimistic because of these troop movements, and they think that this is another ruse. This is another deception operation, like the other two we experienced. Uh, but overall, I think these type of statements are welcomed in Iran. It shows a level of solidarity, and Iran could use solidarity as we speak.
And finally, I know you only have a few minutes before you return to Al Jazeera. I wanted to ask you in a similar vein about a statement that was just made by David Barnea, the chief of Israel's Mossad. He gave a speech uh, in which he said, I believe this was at a Holocaust remembrance event. He said that the Mossad's mission in Iran will not be over until there has been regime change. And he made quite clear that whatever the outcome of these negotiations may be, the Mossad will continue working to overthrow the current government of Iran. And he said quite openly in this speech, by the way, it's not that we didn't already know this, that the Mossad was arming agents within Iran during these protests in January for the purpose of targeting the security forces. Just came right out and said it. But in any case, when I combine this statement from the chief of the Mossad, public statement, with what the Russians are saying, and the whole history of U.S. Israeli treachery its disregard for ceasefires, for peace agreements. It seems to me quite clear that they have not yet settled upon, they have not come to grips with the reality that the only way to secure peace and stability in the region is to make significant concessions to Iran and to stop waging war in Iran. I just personally, I'm deeply skeptical that this is going to go anywhere. I'm curious what you make of all of this.
I agree with you. And Trump a few days ago said the same thing, that he sent arms to the so-called protesters. When if someone in Iran receives arm from Mossad or the United States, and they use that arm to shoot at police, in English they don't call that person a protester. That they call that person a Mossad agent, an American agent, a cop killer, a police shooter. So the United States organized that coup. We had a coup in Iran in 1953, which was successful. We had another coup in 2026, January. That was not successful. The idea that U.S. and Israel had was that maybe they could overthrow the Iranian government in the 2026 coup, so they don't have to attack Iran militarily. That failed. And I'm very surprised when I hear, media outlets on the progressive side in the United States, like Amy Goodman, Democracy Now. They insist on not realizing that Iran experienced a coup. They're very good at 1953 coup. They remember that. They talk about that. But they refuse to acknowledge the fact that what Iran saw in 2026 in January was another coup. So they bring analysts that call these people protesters. We did not experience a protest, we experienced a coup. In the first couple of days, we had genuine protests, but once those protesters realized that Mossad is taking over, they stayed home. They didn't continue. And we lost over 200 police officers. How would you lose police officers when they are shot at? And this is what Israelis have acknowledged. This is what the U.S. has acknowledged. They needed this to demonize Iran. Right before the war, in his State of Union address, Trump said that Iran had killed 32,000 people, exaggerated numbers. The Iranian government published the names of all victims, about 3,000 people, and most of them, we had over 200 police officers killed, and then 2,200 people, ordinary citizens, killed by these Mossad Israeli American agents to increase the number of deaths so they could demonize Iran later on when they wanted to attack Iran. So realizing this fact, realizing that the U.S. needs to demonize the other side before they start shooting, is something that is not very difficult to understand. This is what the United States has been all about. I was talking to this African American professor last night in the United States, and this is what they did with the African slaves. They said that these are not human. They're not really human. They looked at Africans as subhuman. That's how they could enslave them and use their labor in the manner they did. So the U.S. was started with demonization of the people that they wanted to exploit, and not remembering that fact when it comes to Iran is very puzzling to me.
Thank you very much for joining us today, and please stay safe, Dr. Izadi, and we look forward to our next conversation.